Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film The Babadook. When I watch a horror film, I like to watch it at night, or at least when it's dark, with all the lights off. It's kind of like getting drunk before a comedy. It's like I want it to have its full effect. And since usually no one's willing to do that with me, it's by myself, making it even scarier. That made this film even more unnerving and spooky, because this film is a very dark film, lighting-wise. I mean, it's dark thematically also. It's very dark and creepy and spooky. It is a proper, well-directed, spooky horror film. It is the kind of horror film that will leave you unnerved. And that's the kind of great horror film I've been waiting for. It is without a doubt the best horror film of 2014. Not only is the direction so good, but it's also really talking about something underneath. The issue of having a problem with someone who's taking over your life, who's maybe isn't the best person. This single mother looking after her child who's an absolute terror, who has behavioral problems, and realizing your kid might not be the best person, but you're responsible for them and have to care for them. But it's also an incredibly well-directed horror movie. That certainly makes it memorable and makes it exciting and makes it palpable and makes it stand out a little bit more. It's very well constructed and built. The Babadook comes in and terrifies you, but also makes you think about a certain issue the way a really great horror genre film can. A single mother, Amelia, who's raising her son by herself because on the way to the delivery room, her husband was killed in a car accident, and she had her son Samuel, and he's having various behavior problems at school. He makes his own weapons. He snuck them into school and hurt someone with it, so he has to be taken out of school while she finds a new school because they wanted to give him a monitor and separate him from the rest of the kids because he was considered dangerous. And she doesn't know really what to do. She's by herself. She's a caregiver at an old folks home who are also a little demanding as well, and she always looks tired and worn out from all this caregiving to people who aren't really very nice to her in return. And one night, as it's time to read her son a story before bed, it's his turn to pick out a book for her to read, and he picks out a book called Mr. Babadook. It's a pop-up book, and she starts reading it and realizes it's incredibly disturbing, which upsets her son Samuel, and then he becomes obsessed with this creature, the Babadook. Becomes even worse and worse than he was before, having tantrums and kicking the back of her seat while they're driving because he believes in this creature, the Babadook, and he can't sleep because of it, and she becomes unnerved as well. They're trying to find out if Samuel is going insane or there really is a creature like the Babadook, and as Amelia is unsure as well whether this is going to haunt them and destroy them or whether this is just them going insane themselves. This film's very impressive when you consider it was only made on $2.5 million. There's been a lot made about the Kickstarter campaign to raise $30,000. Apparently that was just for the art direction, but Jennifer Kent had raised money from the Australian government and other various production companies to do that, so it was actually 2.5, but when you look at it, it looks probably better than both of the Insidious films that I think cost quite a bit more than this. It speaks a lot to Jennifer Kent's direction. When you think of the great horror directors and their horror films that launched them into being the great names that they are, whether it's Wes Craven, John Carpenter, or George Romero, they all had these films that were incredibly well directed for their budget. When you hear about the budget, it's just amazing they got such a good, important, and well directed film. And I think The Babadook, even though that's a pretty weighty thing to say about it, is directed in that way. It's a very finely tuned, made horror film. You can't escape that this is about motherhood and taking care of people. They don't really get into the old folks home element as much, but you definitely can tell that's wearing on her also. And the idea of, if you're a mother, you're supposed to love your children and love that they've taken over your life and taken all your free time, and that's pretty much all you're doing is taking care of this kid who's kind of ungrateful and will say pretty horrendously horrible and embarrassing things in front of you, and you're just supposed to deal with it and love it all the time. And Jennifer Kent noticed that as an observation, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of horror directors do. They notice something about society that we can't talk about, or that is underneath the surface, or something that they've always wanted to talk about, and they do it through a horror film. When you have an idea and a theory, I always say that a lot, you know, if a film really has a theory about itself, it feels a lot stronger. It feels like it really means a lot more. And I think that's one of the things that makes The Babadook such an impressive film, but also such a memorable film, and a film that really makes the terror stick with you. What's really interesting is it brings in that idea and it uses that idea really well. but it almost plays with it and twists your perception of these characters. It wants to play with you as an audience member and what you thought of certain characters, and Samuel and Amelia, and what you think of them early on in the film is subverted to say even more. It is kind of a tonal shift in a lot of places, but it does that so well that it's emphasizing its point and its theory. By the end, it's all very clear, but I think when you're seeing that happen, I was just so surprised at the leaps it would really take and how those really paid off for the film. Saying these things about parenthood and taking care of anyone when they're treating you horribly, you're not sure what to do and you're coming at your wit's end. A lot of times when people think of their parents and their mom, it's really kind of saintly, and that's completely against really what humans are like. There's a lot of women who hate having to do all these things because they love their kids, but it's really like what it's done to them. Taking the fears of a parent and making a great horror film of it is not something new at all. In fact, it's something very old and something that makes horror very scary. Like, look at Rosemary's Baby. Jennifer Kent is someone who understands horror. She's very well versed in horror, not just the classics, but how it can really work. But it's also a very scary film and a descent into madness film, and a lot of things to do with it. When I was really starting to get into horror, I didn't really get into horror until I was a teenager, and I remember just seeing like what everyone said was best horror movies, and if I felt unnerved and creeped out for the rest of the day, I knew that was a great horror film. But if a film can really like make you keep thinking about it and thinking about the ideas within that film and what happened to those characters, and that thing can mean so much to you, then I think it was a very good movie. I think it was a memorable movie, and it shows the impact that art and film, movies specifically, can have on you. And I think The Babadook does that very well, just the way a great horror movie does. Essie Davis, who plays Amelia, and it shows a really great actress. She just shows such a great range in this film. She shows all the downtroddenness, all the emotion that the film needs through her face. And I think that's something that when you're not being like a Lon Chaney or doing something very showy, people don't notice. This film wouldn't work without Essie Davis. She is so essential to this film. And a truly great actor in a film is as much of a storyteller as the director and the writer of the film. And I think without Essie Davis, this film wouldn't work as well. She is such a key element to this film working as well as it does. She just shows all the emotion and reacts in the way that makes it even spookier and scarier. Sometimes the real scary parts are fleeting, but her emotion on her face triggers that so well. I think it's probably one of the best horror performances I've seen, and as long as it's been since I've seen a horror movie that's as good as The Babadook, frankly. And Samuel, played by Noah Weissman. I've read a lot of negative things about kid actors, but I thought he was really, really good. That like shitty, terribly behaved kid that you always feel bad for the parent. You're like, oh my god, what's that life gotta be like that Twilight Zone episode with the kid who can read thoughts and like do all that horrible stuff, except like it's real life and he's just like has a shitty attitude and does a million things and can't control himself. I don't know if that's just like how he is or he's such a good actor, but he can convey that very well, and it helps the story because you definitely feel for her having to deal with this immensely shitty kid. Another one of the things I like a lot about this film, and it's something that The Omen did and Rosemary's Baby and Roman Polanski also did in Repulsion, is this idea of, are they really haunted or are they just crazy? This film holds on to that for a very long time. I like that in horror because it's a lot more creative than just showing the monster. Not that, well, okay, it's a different kind of creativity, but it is very impressive, like the whole idea of Jaws, where they don't show the shark for the whole movie. It shows like you really are stripping away the things you can really do, delaying the gratification of seeing this monster, or delaying the scare of seeing the Babadook. They have him pop up in Amelia's film she's watching on TV and stuff. He looks like that. He looks like something out of German Expressionism. I love that in horror when you can play with the idea of, yeah, you think you're seeing this film about a scary creature, but maybe her kid started going crazy and he let her to go crazy. And you will eventually figure out what is going on, but much like The Omen or Rosemary's Baby, it is played through this perspective, so you're also not sure, like, well, maybe their perspective is wrong, maybe they are going insane. Well, I guess it's more in the Polanski way. It's in the Polanski way that Jennifer Kent is using the perspective and making you think like, well, maybe she is going insane, maybe not having any sleep and personal time and being destroyed by this terrible kid is ruining her and she's going insane. Maybe there is no Babadook. A descent into madness, it's kind of a cliche of a movie. Everybody talks about descent into madness, but when you're not sure if it's a spooky creature or their own mind. I think that's also scary, because one of the scariest things of horror is not truly understanding what exactly is going on. I think that's one of the essential parts in horror. The less you understand, the scarier it is. The less she understands about the Babadook, why the book keeps showing up, why certain things happen, the spookier it is, and that's in there. But the idea of this is random, but it's also talking about the larger idea of still having demons inside you when you have to deal with like this terrible person of a kid, and the idea of parenthood within a horror film. Some people might disagree with this and don't want to go into these issues, but I think that's one of the things that a really great horror film can really do, is like kind of unconsciously talk about these issues, talk about things within parenthood that are like very human emotions. But the Babadook brings them up, and like that scary creature comes up and attacks. There's plenty of times when you were a kid and your parents yelled at you a little too much and you felt like they went too far. But it's like they have to bury that down, because you can't be in like kid mode your entire life if you're like in your late 20s or 30s or however old you are dealing with them. Sometimes you want some time to yourself, and that's a really scary thing, that person who's taking all that time can be a terrible person. How are you going to deal with having a shitty kid? And having a monster represent that is definitely a scary, spooky thing. And having a metaphor in horror, it's worked for all sorts of monsters before, and I think Babadook goes along in that tradition and shows that Jennifer Kent is a well-researched and very smart student of film, but also specifically horror film as well. So if you have seen the Babadook and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.